So I'm here with George Hulse. Brilliant to get to hang out with you, George.
Love being with you, Rich. Hello to anybody and everybody looking on.
So we're talking about how you're going back into church services coming out of the restrictions of COVID-19. You guys were on lockdown, churches on lockdown, went into the online space, and now it's eased. The government has said you can go back to doing church. So how have you been navigating the new normal and going back to church?
Yes, well, it's certainly a navigating, that is for sure. So here's the big idea. We're continuing to produce church services online in homes. Like, that's the main thing. And we keep saying that. Church is coming to you online and in your home. Then we are following government restrictions very carefully. We've been reading Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, obey the governing authorities. And that was written under Rome. So it's not about whether your governing authority is moral or loves you or not. It's about bringing peace to your own situation. So we've been really watching our governing authorities and abiding by their guidelines as best we can, and being careful with that. And because of that, we have actually been meeting outside. And so we haven't actually had a church service yet with people together. So what we're doing is sending church into homes online. Yeah. And then we're adding gatherings according to the guidelines of our government. And those gatherings have been outside. So our first one was a prayer gathering. And we have people reserve a spot with an X on the ground outside. So the X's are at every 12 feet. We ask people to bring a mask. We're saying bring a mask because, and I wasn't aware of this, but some people think wearing a mask is a statement of fear, that you're afraid of something. And we turned that whole thing around and we said, wearing a mask is a statement of love, that you're willing to protect another person. Yeah. So we say everybody should have a mask with them. And if the other person wants you to put it on, put it on. It's not required, but it's certainly a way to show love. So we've required people to have masks with them, reserve a spot. And we've been doing kind of 2 gathering times. And we've been careful not to call them church services so people don't go, why do I have to reserve a spot for church? Yeah. This isn't a reservation for church. This is a reservation for a gathering, just like any other gathering we would do, whether it was about marriage or kids or camp or whatever. You sign up and your spot is, held for you. So
I guess people have the expectation in coming back that they're coming back to how things were, but we can't do things how they were because it's not safe to do that right now. So I think it's very wise to kind of do something different. So what is it that you've done? You've done a prayer meeting?
Yeah, and then this week is at the first Sunday of the month, we always take communion or Lord's Supper together. So this coming up Sunday, we'll be doing that in our parking lot. We called it a praise and communion gathering. We don't call it a service. We call it a praise and communion gathering. And we say, we'll be singing praise songs together and socially distanced, or 12 feet apart or on, sign up so that you have a spot, and we'll be singing worship songs together and taking communion together. I'll be adding, of course, some Bible verses and things in there as well. But for the most part, it's just a gathering in our church's parking lot.
So how did it go on the first week as everybody arrived and everybody's distanced? Because I know I've been talking with a few pastors who are going, this is going to be such a strange thing that you can't go and greet one another and high five one another and hug one another. And, if you're going there by yourself, you're just by yourself, whereas a family might be all together. So the whole experiences must be so different. How did it actually work out when you did it?
Well, we were thanking the Lord because it actually worked out really, really well. So you're exactly right. There were some singles who came and had their own ex, standing by themselves. And we kept saying, we use the phrase, your non-distanced group. And by that, because it's not just your family. Like in our house, my kids have some friends who are allowed in our non-distanced group because we know that they've been safe and they're okay too. So we said, gather together with your non-distanced group and pray through this issue or that issue. Well, we saw certain single people standing by themselves. So this week we're going to remedy that and say, hey, if you're here by yourself, stand in a circle with others, but just stay at a distance. So we're just enforcing the distance thing, but I'm telling you, people loved it. That about 50% had masks on the whole time. Mm-hmm. Some have masks on, but everybody stayed distant. And we just said, this is what it is right now. We put everything in the context of love. This is what it means to love your brothers and sisters right now, is not to hug. And we had signs when people entered in that some of our staff were holding, just printed signs. You could make a cardboard sign or whatever, but it said, you are entering an air hug zone. Please do not hug.
So
And
good.
some, can I hug you? And I just asked them, like, have you been well? Like, are you okay? And they, and if they were somebody I knew really well, or I trusted that they had been well or something like that, it just, I hugged a few people, but very few, and they asked. So I would just say the morning went really, really well, better than I expected. And people were, overjoyed. I didn't see any hugging. I didn't see any high-fiving. Nobody forced anything physically on anybody else. And the whole thing went so well that people were writing me emails afterward about how good it felt. One woman drove down from LA who doesn't even come to our church just because she wanted to be with other believers. I mean, it went really, really well.
It's interesting how I think from, as we kind of speak to the Surf Church Collective, different countries have got different vibes, different levels of restrictions, like the idea in Cornwall of anybody driving down to them right now, because they're relatively untouched by the virus. And now the summer's arriving, and that's when all the tourists come to do church where they are. So they're going, if you're a tourist, you don't come, because the potential of the virus moving is massively high. In fact, in a couple of towns in the UK, they've seen massive spikes because people have come out from the cities on their days off. So pastors having to work through, are strangers allowed to come to these services? How we have to book people in. As you went into the process of trying to work it through, did it seem daunting? Has it been a headache, or have you found it kind of just easy to navigate?
Well, I thought it was going to be a huge headache because nobody has ever had to sign up for anything like this before, because it kind of feels like a church service, and we've never done, booking your spot for something like that before. So I was like, are people even going to do this? The spots booked up within hours, and people just willingly showed up with all their own chairs, their own thermos of coffee, their own blankets, their own hats, their own sunscreen. And we just said, bring your own everything. And we'll bring the content of the day in a socially distanced kind of way. And people were more than happy. They packed in like they were going to a family picnic. They were so excited. Everybody brought their chairs and everything. So we didn't have anything to have to wipe down or clean or anything. So I would say, if you have the opportunity to do something in an outside spot, or the weather permitting, or you had the room, that would be the best place to start, in my opinion, because it worked so well for us.
So what were your timings? So did you do an hour-long service? Did you have rotation? So a couple of different services through the day?
So we called it the first one a prayer gathering, the second one a communion gathering, and we had an 8:30 a.m. and a 10:30 a.m. gathering, and we had a couple hundred spots available that we thought. We've expanded those spots now. Seeing on week one, we thought, oh my gosh, we could have handled double that amount. So we did expand that number of spots. And because we're outside and not inside, the limitations of the governing authorities don't apply to an outside gathering. So we have a little more freedom there for more people, and as long as we're continuing social distance protocols. So we're still within government guidelines, while at the same time being outside provided a huge measure of safety, I think, for people. And I think it's good to remember, your people, no matter who they are all over the map. One woman wrote me and she was like, I couldn't believe some people didn't have masks on, but I was thankful they didn't come over close to me. They stayed distant from me. And she said, I felt safe the whole time. So thank you for wearing your mask. I made sure all of our staff had a mask either hanging from their ear or across their face, that it was right there. And I just said, just be ready to love another person. If they have a mask on, draw it across your face and talk to them. If they don't, you can just let it hang from your ear or like kind of around your neck kind of thing, but have it at ready, like, cause that says love, cause you've got vulnerable who might be very concerned that if they get it, it could be very dangerous for them.
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, as a church leader, to be thinking through the fact that by gathering people, we can put people at risk. these are new things we're having to negotiate and navigate. Sorry, not negotiate, navigate through. I know I was speaking to some pastors, and they're worried about the liability issues if somebody gets sick at a service that they've put on. So I think it's very helpful to be finding a way in love to enforce those social distancing rules, and no hugging signs and the X's on the floors. I think that's really very helpful.
We found all of those things to be very helpful, and we were very clear and forthright in when you signed up. You got an email that told you everything you needed. Like when you booked your spot, you got an email returned to you that had it all outlined about, bring all your own stuff, stay socially distanced, bring a mask so you can love another person, and we said all of those things up front. And then on the day, everybody was really prepared, and it went really well. So I would just say prepare really well, communicate really well up front, and then let the day kind of unfold, with the joy of being together in a
were there any things
that
didn't work? Are there any things that you went, oh yeah, we're going to change that immediately? That didn't quite nail it.
Yeah, the single people, we weren't quite ready that some people would be alone standing on an X 12 feet away from somebody else. And we were like, so this week we're going to remedy that and say, if you are a single, stand in a circle with other singles, stay apart from one another, but at the same time, make a circle with the others that are around you for prayer, because we'll have some guided prayer time, some ministry time together. So just getting those singles connected is one thing. And then when we dismissed everybody, we didn't give any instruction, because I actually wanted people to kind of hang around and see each other and talk a little bit, without bunching up together. But one comment was, hey, when everybody left, they were all bunched up down the sidewalk, and I felt unsafe. So maybe just some, like, when you leave, please be mindful that some people would really appreciate, the space. And, just, it's really trying to help people love the person who might feel more vulnerable to things, how to love that person. Maybe you don't need anything. Maybe you're not afraid of the virus, and you don't need a mask, and you're not going to wash your hands, and maybe you think this is a hoax or whatever, but that doesn't mean you don't need to love the person who's being very careful, because we do, and that's that 1 Corinthians 14 is just looking out for that person, the other person. Restrict your freedoms for the good of another. That's what love does. So
that's brilliant, because there are so many people with so many different views about the reality of what this pandemic is, what this infection is, how infectious, and also from a Christian perspective, there's so many different views that are running around there. Viewing it as I'm going to behave in the way that protects those people who do feel insecure, don't feel safe, from a position of love, is a great way, George. That's very helpful. Have you taught on that in the context? Has that been like the subtext as you've been communicating the way in which to do these services?
That's what we've been kind of calling our underlying values. That's when my team is together planning, I'm saying, everything you do, make sure you include how to love another person in your communication, so that all of us are communicating along those lines. I haven't explicitly taught on those things from up front. Usually up front, I'm talking about seeking the Lord, really, like prayer and asking God's mercy, over our situation, seeking to love another person. We've been definitely talking about that related to the racism problems and all that. It's like, and related to that, the beauty of it is that within the church, when I talk to my African American friends that come to our church and everything, they say, within this church, I have felt nothing but love and acceptance and equality. And so the church really is this beautiful place, that we can hold out as the light. Because if Jesus changes a person's heart, like imagine if Jesus changed the heart of leaders of these movements, of leaders of law enforcement. If Jesus changed their heart, they would be leading in new and exciting and different ways of love. So I just want the church to be held out as a model of light and goodness and love. And thankfully, I think in our area, it has been that. So that's been a good thing.
Have you picked up on any nervousness about coming back and the whole kind of re-engagements.
Yes, that was actually kind of funny to me. One family came and they said, we're here representing about 5 other families. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, we were sent out to see what this was like today, and they're waiting to hear our report when we get back to tell them it was okay.
Love it.
Whole group that's holding back, and that's okay. They're just not signing up, they're not registering, but they're watching super closely. And that's a whole crew that's out there, and we know they're out there, so we're just kind of aware of that, which makes sense then to say, then therefore let's make sure church goes out into homes, online, in homes. That whole crew is still doing church in their home.
So that's important, because I think many people are going to have to be doing both. The still driving for this online church, as well as the beginnings of, face-to-face meetings. But of course, that in many ways is doubling, tripling, quadrupling workloads, as now it goes to multiple services because you can only have so many. And so how are you keeping yourselves, or are you thinking about how you're going to keep yourselves fresh as a team? Because I know that for many pastors, they've worked like crazy through this COVID time. It's been anything but restful, whereas others have been watching, maybe if you've been on furlough, you've been able to watch Netflix. But for most pastors, they've been going crazy, and now they're going into another crazy season, and everybody wants to get back to church, and there's no time for holidays. And so how are you guys keeping fresh and smiling? And
well, that's been one of the hardest things. You can't predict. So I keep telling everybody, hey, they're looking to me as a leader, and I'm saying, I can't predict the future, that, but I can prepare for it and be ready when it comes. So that's what I keep saying is, this isn't about prediction. This is about preparations. So roughly, we are prepared through June to be doing both online services and parking lot gatherings of some sort, and just combining those two. Then when it comes to July, we'll keep our eye on government restrictions, and hopefully come July, we might be able to do something that might be more like a live church service. That will also, though, be sign up. It will be distanced. But the thing at that point is we could film that live, and then that could become our produced service that goes out online after that service has been held. So in that way, we're not doing a midweek production and editing and everything. It's a live broadcast that would go on Facebook and YouTube and website and things like that too. So we're preparing for that too. We're just getting lighting a little better on our stage and things, so that if we did a live service and we taped it, we could send that out come maybe July, maybe mid-July, maybe even August. That's why I say we can't predict. We're going to be prepared.
Yeah, that's good. I think that Southern California is a unique scenario where you can lock it in for a weekend to have sunshine and be able to be outside, which is brilliant that you can get away from those regulations. I think being prepared for what's next and leaning into what you can do right now is important, because there are many churches, they're going to have very small buildings that just, you can't get the amount of people that you want into that space. So I think that everybody pivoting to this online space and knowing when to make the transition back into normal services, or how to keep the online ministry going as you're going to the next normal is going to be important in the next phase.
And that's it. I think there's something to be said for that too, because not everybody wants to come back together right now. And so your numbers are going to be lower. So you're actually okay to plan for lower numbers and keep everybody distanced in the beginning, and find a way to put out some type of video, either of that service or of one that you pre-recorded, because just not everybody is anxious to get back together. And by the way, we're not doing any kids ministry or student ministries or everybody is in that parking lot together with their own families. So if they want to bring their kids, they're going to have to hold. And we kept services at right around 45 minutes to 55 minutes. We were very careful not to go over an hour with everybody outside. So
brilliant. Yeah, I think that I'm going to do some talking with some other guys in the team as to what they're doing with young people and kids work and youth work, because I think that's been an interesting space in amongst the last 8 weeks, and going forward that's going to be fascinating. But for now, George, it's really helpful, because I know that many of the crew are now beginning that journey. So it's been brilliant to hear from you. And if you've got some more learnings for us going forward, then hit it into our WhatsApp space so that we can keep abreast of the story. Because I think America is that you guys are ahead of us. I don't think anybody else has actually gone practically to live services right now at the Surf Church Collective. We're there in the next few weeks, I think, for some.
Yeah. Well, what a blessing if by doing this, we can end up at some point in the future and say every surfer has access to a surf-friendly church. Wouldn't that be a blessing?
That's the prayer, mate. Absolutely. Thanks, man. You.